Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peak and Flow podcast. My name is Dave Nixon and today is another edition to the BSFT30 series, and today we're going to be talking about stages, not ages. And so which really stages, not ages is a principle more than anything. Where this principle really came from was understanding that we develop through stages of development and through multiple lines of and variations of areas of life, right? Lines of intelligence is the actual term that we normally use, but let's just say areas of life. And so there's a large volume of developmental psychologists or behavioral psychologists or many other fields of work that see the stages that human beings develop through. And the key thing here is actually mapping that across how people develop through other areas. And so I've used this for the Life Athlete Matrix, which I spoke about in an earlier podcast. Because what I've learned over the last 20 years in the industry and working with 10,000 people and then mapping it across these other people's frameworks is that people actually develop through these stages of development, both physical, mental, social, in relationships with nutrition, everything, rather than ages. And so what can commonly happen is if someone doesn't actually have this frame of mind, they can find themselves, not always, but a couple of things are like they're not progressing. So they're frustrated with not progressing. They don't know how to track their progression. So they don't know how to go, if it's only right and wrong or good and bad or all or nothing or go hard, go home. I don't know how to track progression in between those 2 points. And so it becomes a black and white approach, which means that there's no progression. It means that the person struggles to go, okay, where am I at and where am I wanting to go? And what are the steps to get there? And how do I know if I'm progressing through those steps? And so taking that frame of thinking completely and fundamentally shifts how we approach health, relationships, mental health, nutrition, everything. The difficulty is that when it just becomes black and white and good and bad and right and wrong and all or nothing and go hard, go home, there ends up being a lot of nothing and a lot of going home. And so what it can do is leave the person continually desiring the destination. And the destination can be wanting to lose weight, wanting to feel better about themselves. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's this thing that they don't have. And this is the interesting thing around desire, is desire keeps us wanting because it's literally presupposing you do not have this thing. And what's interesting is really commonly people do have what they actually desire. They've just put conditions in front of their actual ability to give it to themselves. So hopefully I get to unpack that bit for you tonight. But really important. What ultimately this can come down to for each individual that can struggle with this is they fear that they're going to never change, that they're somehow faulty, and this is as good as it gets. And that's not the reality. And I promise you, there's many different outcomes that people can move towards. And if you go down this path and you give yourself permission to fumble and stumble down this path, you'll be able to get a clear pathway, which is the path you're walking down. But understand that it's a continual unfolding and that there is no finish line. There is no final destination. And there's a quote here, and it's I think it's a really important one, is that the person that loves walking compared to the person will go further than the person that loves the destination. So I'll say that again without the stutter. The person that loves walking will go further than the person that loves the destination. And so this is the whole idea of falling in love with the process. And so it doesn't mean that you have to find the process fun and enjoyable all the time forever. It's more so understanding that your goal is who you become by going through that process, rather than thinking that there's going to be some sort of end day where someone comes and gives you this certification that you are qualified in whatever it is that you've done and this is going to be amazing and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't work. No one's coming to save you. No one's coming to give you permission to be your authentic self. None of that shit's happening. It's not happening. What can happen is you going, where am I at now? Where am I wanting to go? And what are the steps that are going to allow me to get there? And that's the way that we break it down. And so we call that literally starting basic and building. Another thing though is that it's shifting from this black and white thinking to process thinking. So what's the process? What's the procedure? At least that we can start with, because we might change it along the way. We start to shift from seeing failure as a person to seeing failure as an event. A failure is actually not the opposite of success, but rather a necessary component of success. So failure is your costs of engagement of going down the path of success for you. And so understanding that means that I will absolutely come up against failure, but failure is not a stop sign. It's not a full stop. It's a comma. Failure is an event. It's not me. There's this interesting paradox called the Stockdale paradox. And it's in Jim Collins, good to great, behind me somewhere. And he interviewed this prisoner of war survivor. I don't know his level of army. That's terrible language, but you can see that I've never been in the army. And either way, he was interviewed and asked what was the difference between the people that survived and the people that didn't. And he goes, "Well, that was easy. The people that died were the optimists." They go, "Really?" He's like, "Yep, the people that died were the optimists." And what that meant and what he was saying was, it wasn't that they were holding on to hope. What it was is that they were saying to themselves, "We'll be out by Thanksgiving." And that came around and they weren't. And they go, "It's fine. We're going to be out by Christmas." And Christmas came around and it wasn't. And they're like, "That's okay. We're going to be out by Easter." And then Easter came around and they weren't. And so it really, this blind hope of the future, this blind optimism, this naivety eroded away their will to live. And so it wasn't necessarily that the pessimists survive, although there's some validity to that. What it was is that the people that survived had this what he called the Stockdale paradox. And so what they did is they looked at the brutal facts and maintained hope. And when we can do that with ourselves, we can go, where am I currently at with all this, with all the stages, with all the lines, all this, pillars, whatever you want to call them. Where am I currently at? And where do I want to go? And what are the next steps? And have this hope and belief that you have it in you, and you do, to go down that path. But you've got to start, and it is literally step by step. And so you go through this now, and we recap on that. It's like you start basic and build, you black and white thinking to process thinking. And here's just a quick one on that. If you ever hear the term trust the process, it is not necessarily talking about a procedure outside of you. You are the process. So it's not trusting the process necessarily outside of you. It's about trusting you through that process. If all you do is put full trust in the process, what it's presupposing as well, if you can trust both, that's a double win. What it's presupposing is that you're not trusting you. But if you trust you through the process, because you are the process unfolding, that's where real magic happens. And I'm not saying magic in some sort of esoteric term. I'm saying magic from a place of like, that's where you get the juice you're squeezing for. So you are the process. Black and white to process, failure is an event, not a person, and the Stockdale paradox really allows us to get these understandings of going, how do I develop through these stages? And one last point on that is that there is a key difference between 10 years experience and 1 year's experience 10 times. Yes, it's good to practice one kick, 100,000 times or however many Bruce Lee said. There's a key difference though in 10 years experience or 1 year's experience 10 times. So what you're after here is this continual development, this building on, right? You don't just do kindergarten 10 years in a row and get really good at kindergarten. You go through kindergarten, then you go through year 1 to senior school or high school, college, and so forth. You build on it. That's 10 years experience. Just staying in kindergarten is 1 year experience 10 times, which some people do. So the areas of life we need to look at to really start building on these stages and ages is actually across the whole life athlete matrix. So it's mind, move, mouth, and manage, or method rather. And the couple of processes that we need to follow this, or protocols, is actually once again meeting yourself where you're at. Now, hopefully by the time that you listen to this, I would have completed the BossFit scorecard for you so you can answer the questions that are asked and get an understanding and a score of where you sit within this scorecard. Now, from there, you're able to actually build out a plan of going, okay, where am I at? Now, based on the scorecard and the matrix, and based on my life goals and life games, where do I need to be in order to be able to live and be and do and have those life goals and games continually? And so that's how we can literally map out through these areas, where am I at and where do I want to go? And it literally will be step by step, because we must first build a base, because when we say start basic and build, it is presupposing, it is inferring, build a base and build on that. It's literally in the language. Now, one key thing here that can really fundamentally shift this is moving away from this, once again, learning is I either learn it or I don't, to seeing learning as a process. And if you're ever familiar with the conscious competence scale, people start off with this unconscious incompetence. They don't know what they're not good at. Now, when they try something for the first time, they become consciously incompetent. They start to become aware of what they're not good at. They're consciously incompetent. I'll give you an example in a moment. And then as they do conscious and deliberate practice at that thing, they become consciously competent, but they still have to really focus on that thing. And then the more they practice, and the more they practice, and the more they practice, they start to become unconsciously competent. And there would be things in your life that you do unconsciously competent. You don't even know how you do it or how you've done it so well. It's just like it's second nature, which is not true. It's nurture. It's second nature to you because it feels like nature. And you just do it so easy. But if I was to say, hey, how do you do that? How do you know to do that? What tells you to do that? You can start to bring awareness to how you do things so well. And this is the last stage, which is conscious unconscious competence. And that where teachers sit. That is exactly where teachers sit, because they go, how do I break this down so that I can teach other people? And you bring conscious awareness to what people do unconsciously well, and they teach that. An example of all this is driving. And so when you first learn to drive, or you're watching your parents drive and you're too young, and you watch them and it's easy. They've got a steering wheel, there's an accelerator, there's a brake, and a little sticky thing, and nowadays there's auto, so you don't even need to worry about that. Anyway, so you're watching them and you're like, that's piss easy. And then you get into the driver's seat for the first time, and you grip the hell out of the steering wheel, and there's horns, and there's blinkers that you're missing, and there's stop signs. There's so much stimulus. You become consciously aware of just how incompetent you are at this skill. And so from there, you have to practice. To get better and pass a test, you actually have to practice to get consciously competent at the skill of driving on behalf of you and everyone else on the road. Have you ever driven somewhere and you're just driving, and then all of a sudden you arrive at your destination? And as you arrive, you're sort of being like, I have no idea how I've completely zoned out. I don't even remember getting here. Did I drive through a red light? Did I actually blink when I turned that? You have become unconsciously competent in a way that I'm not recommending, but in the sense that you didn't have to consciously think about as you were driving. Now, hopefully you weren't intoxicated. My point there being is that this now becomes a skill. If I was like, how did you do that? You'd be like, I have no idea. It's just something I've done for ages now. I've done it for 15, 20, 30 years. Now, to be able to teach someone how to drive, and a lot of parents start to learn just how incompetent they are at teaching how to be competent at this skill. And so they have to develop the skill of being consciously aware of what they do unconsciously to make their driving really safe. And so it's a really, really cool skill, but that now they become the teacher. So that's an example of moving through those conscious competent stages. Another example of learning as a process is there's 4 levels, and it actually goes across the quadrants, but the quadrants being the integral theory quadrants, but these quadrants, it goes know of, know about, relate with, and embody. And each stage, you get more attuned and get a deeper understanding or deeper knowing in your neurology about whatever it is, skill sets and area of intelligence that you're developing. So one of the best bits of advice I got given in the world of coaching was that you just go in, you just do it for years and years, and you learn and you play, and over time you move from know about coaching, and coaching in the sense of developmental coaching, and then you know about coaching, so you can talk about it and explain it a little bit, and then the more you do it, you really start to relate with it, and you can start to see things that you couldn't see before, so you're seeing things at a deeper and a different level. And then after some time, it's just an embodiment for you. You don't coach, coaching happens around you. Now, let me give you yet another example. When I explain this to people, I'm like, let's say you joined a run club. And in your run club, you've started out and you've just gone, of course, some people know all about run clubs. Some people maybe even know a bit about them and how they work. And it's not just the running, it's actually the socialness of it. And then some people can relate with it because they've started to become a part of a run club. And you go, this is great, fantastic. And they jump in and they go for their run once a week. Now, tell me this, if you were part of a run club and you rock up one morning at 6 a.m. and David Goggins was there, and if you don't know who David Goggins is, pause the video and go look him up and then come back to this. And David Goggins was there and was part of your run club that morning. My question for you is, are you running any different that morning? And usually the answer for people is yes. Does David Goggins need to say anything to you in order for you to run different? My answer is no. that energy, that motivation, that enthusiasm, that zest that he has, and he probably would hate all those words, but it's true. He doesn't have to do anything. That happens around him. That the Goggins is embodied in him. So there's an example of that just happening around someone because of how they embody their way of being. And so these are the stages of learning that we actually get to move through and learn through over time. And it's really, really important and powerful. When we apply those two principles to understanding self and other and building our body awareness, and we start to see that we build ourselves through these stages of learning, then we move past this point of like, I have to arrive somewhere, and realize that we are the process unfolding. And as corny or as esoteric or as shit as it all sounds, it's occurring for you anyway. And so the ability to bring awareness to that and have structure to follow means that there's actually a pathway that you can move down to get better and a deeper understanding of this. And it's one of the best things that you can do for everyone else as well. It literally is, as joking as it sounds, the best thing I can do for you is work on me, and vice versa. You're welcome. And if you do that, you can establish where you're at, you can have continual development, and you can learn to trust the process, and in turn trusting yourself through the process, which once again will give you a clear pathway and understand, even though it's bumpy and you can stumble and you can fail throughout the process, I hope that for you, that you are continually unfolding, but it can give you a direction of where to move towards. And on that note, team, I'm done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the podcast, it'd mean the world to me if you'd pass on to someone else that you think would also enjoy the podcast. If you want to learn more about our BSFT30 program, you can find out more in the show notes below. I've got a few other programs that are going to be coming out for coaches and also for athletes, and they're going to be 100% free, and I'm looking forward to releasing them for you. But that's me done for now. I'm out. Until next time, peace and pizza, and I'll see you soon.